Hi, Mindy Mandell here. Thanks for joining me. So today I'm going on with Plato's Sophist, and as always, we're using the Loeb Classical Library. And also, as always, there is a link in the description box for a PDF version of the text. So where we ended off last time is last week, we talked about how not being in some way is. And so there was a long discussion about that, and then we ended with the stranger saying it's time to take a little bit of a tangent. And so that's where we stopped, and that's where we're going to pick it up today. So this is 241C. This is where we left it off. And if you're using the same text, it is page 355. So the stranger says, "Will you then pardon me, and as your words imply, be content if I somehow withdraw just a short distance from the strong argument of the Sophists?" "Of course I will. I have another still more urgent request to make of you." "What is it?" "Do not assume that I am becoming a sort of parricide." "What do you mean?" "In defending myself, I shall have to test the theory of my father Parmenides, and contend forcibly that after a fashion not being is, and on the other hand, in a sense, being is not. It is plain that some such contention is necessary." I'll pause briefly just to remind you that in the very, very beginning, we learned that the stranger is a student of Parmenides. And so that's what he's talking about here. Of course, it's not his biological father. It's his father in the sense of this is the philosophy that he's part of the school of. So he has then to challenge Parmenides. Let's see what he means by that. "Yes, plain even to a blind man, as they say. For unless these statements are either disproved or accepted, no one who speaks about false words or false opinion, whether images or likenesses or imitations or appearances, or about the arts which have to do with them, can ever help being forced to contradict himself and make himself ridiculous." Very true. And so we must take courage and attack our father's theory here and now, or else, if any scruples prevent us from doing this, we must give the whole thing up. But nothing in the world must prevent us. Then I have a third little request to make of you. You have only to utter it. I said a while ago that I always have been too faint-hearted for the refutation of this theory, and so I am now. Yes, so you did. You did say so. I'm afraid that on account of what I have said, you will think I am mad, because I have at once reversed my position. You see, it is for your sake that I am going to undertake the refutation, if I succeed in it. Well, I certainly shall not think you are doing anything improper if you proceed to your refutation and proof. So go ahead boldly, so far as that is concerned. Well, what would be a good beginning of a perilous argument? Ah, my boy, I believe the way we certainly must take is this. What way? We must first examine the points which now seem clear, lest we may have fallen into some confusion about them, and may therefore carelessly agree with one another, thinking that we are judging correctly. Express your meaning more clearly. It seems to me that Parmenides and all whoever undertook a critical definition of the number and nature of realities have talked to us rather carelessly. How so? Every one of them seems to tell us a story as if we were children. One says there are 3 principles, that some of them are sometimes waging a sort of war with each other, and sometimes they become friends and marry and have children and bring them up. And another says there are 2, wet and dry or hot and cold, which he settles together and unites in marriage. Now notice here we have a footnote. It says here that this is a reference to Pherecydes and the early Ionians. And the Eleatic sect in our region, beginning with Xenophanes and even earlier, have their story that all things, as they are called, are really one. Then some Ionian and later Sicilian muses reflected that it was safest to combine the two tales and to say that being is many and one, and is or are held together by enmity and friendship. So the Ionian, according to this footnote here, is Heraclitus, and the Sicilian is Empedocles. Okay, so these are the pre-Socratics. These are the various theories that were around, talking about the start of all things was wet and dry or hot and cold, talking about marriages and strife and friendship. For the more strenuous muses say it is always simultaneously coming together and separating. But the gentler ones relax the strictness of the doctrine of perpetual strife. They say that the all is sometimes one and friendly under the influence of Aphrodite, and it's sometimes many and at variance with itself by reason of some sort of strife. Now, whether any of them spoke the truth in all this or not, it is harsh and improper to impute to famous men of old such a great wrong as falsehood. But one assertion can be made without offense. What is that? They pay too little attention and consideration to the mass of people like ourselves, for they go on to the end, each in his own way, without caring whether their arguments carry us along with them, or whether we are left behind. Would that really be the concern? I don't know. What do you mean? Theaetetus asks. When one of them says in his talk that many or one or two are, or have become, or are becoming, and again speaks of hot mingling with cold, and in some other part of his discourse suggests separations and combinations. For heaven's sake, Theaetetus, do you ever understand what they mean by any of these things? I used to think when I was younger that I understood perfectly whenever anyone used this term not being, which now perplexes us. But you see what a slough of perplexity we are in about it now. Yes, I see. So if you go back here and look at what they're talking about here, did all of it start? Did the whole start with wet and dry or hot and cold? Were there marriages? Was there strife? Was there friendship? What he's really talking about here is the classic one-many problem. And so that's where he's going now. Perhaps our minds are in this same condition as regards being also. We may think that it is plain sailing and that we understand when the word is used, though we are in difficulties about not being, whereas really we understand equally little of both. Perhaps. And we may say the same of all the subjects about which we have been speaking. Certainly. We will consider most of them later, if you please, but now the greatest and foremost chief of them must be considered. What do you mean? Or obviously, do you mean that we must first investigate the term being and see what those who use it think it signifies? You have caught my meaning at once, Theaetetus, for I certainly do mean that this is the best method for us to use, by questioning them directly, as if they were present in person. So here goes. Come now, all of you who say that hot and cold, or any two such principles, are the universe. What is this that you attribute to both of them when you say that both in each are? What are we to understand by this being, or are, of yours? Is it this third principle besides those two others? And shall we suppose that the universe is three and not two any longer, according to your doctrine? For surely when you call one only of the two being, you do not mean that both of them equally are, for in both cases they would pretty certainly be one and not two. Okay, let's go back here. We'll have to unpack that. But first, I just want to point out that he started here by talking about not being. That's what is perplexing about this whole one-many problem. And then he dropped in being, so he kind of changed the subject. And then Theaetetus says, oh, so we have to investigate this term being, even though you said that not being is the reason we're so perplexed. And he says, oh, you caught my meaning. That's exactly what we have to do. That's the best method. Not really clear it's the best method based on what he said, or that what he said would lead to this being the best method. But anyway, here we are. So then he says, when you have any of these two items, you have hot and cold, or what was the other one he used? Sorry, I forgot. There was wet and dry. Yeah, wet and dry, or hot and cold. When you have any of these two, if you say that they're being, that they are, then is that a third term? That's what he's asking here. Are we to suppose a third principle besides these two others? A third principle, meaning that's being. So whether one of them is being, or both of them are being, or both of them together are being and not wet and cold, or I'm sorry, wet and dry, or hot and cold, or whatever. How are you saying it? If together they were being, then you'd have only one and not two. Theaetetus says that's true. Well then, do you wish to call both of them together being? Perhaps. But friends, we will say, even in that way you would very clearly be saying that the two are one. You are perfectly right. Then since we are in perplexity, do you tell us plainly what you wish to designate when you say being? For it is clear that you have known this all along, whereas we formerly thought we knew, but are now perplexed. So first give us this information, that we may not think we understand what you say, when the exact opposite is the case. If we speak in this way and make this request of them, and of all who say that the universe is more than one, shall we, my boy, be doing anything improper? Not in the least. Well then, must we not, so far as we can, try to learn from those who say that the universe is one, what they mean when they say being? So now we just changed topics again. Now we're going to look at not those who say that there are two principles, but those who say there's only one. And we see from the footnote that this is the Eleatic Zeno and his school. Zeno, of course, was a student of Parmenides, so coming from the same line. And Theaetetus says, yes, of course we must. Then let them answer this question. Do you say that one only is? We do, they will say, will they not? Yes. Well then, do you give the name of being to anything? Yes. Is it what you call one, using two names for the same thing, or how is this? What is their next answer, stranger? Well, it is plain, Theaetetus, that he who maintains their theory will not find it the easiest thing in the world to reply to our present question, or to any other. Why not? It is rather ridiculous to assert that two names exist when you assert that nothing exists but unity. Of course it is. And in general, there would be no sense in accepting the statement that a name has any existence. Why? Because he who asserts that the name is other than the thing says that there are two entities. Yes. Okay, so now we're looking at the name and the thing that is named. Are they two separate things? Are they both beings? How do we treat them? Further, if he asserts that the name is the same as the thing, he will be obliged to say that it is the name of nothing. Or if he says it is the name of something, the name will turn out to be the name of a name merely and of nothing else. So in other words, if the name and the thing named are exactly the same, then it's the name of a name. Or it's the name of nothing, because if the name is nothing but a name, then the thing named, if it's the same, would be nothing. That's what he's trying to say here. It's the name of nothing. Or if he says it's the name of something, the name will turn out to be the name of a name merely and of nothing else. And the one will turn out to be the name of one and also the name of the name. In other words, we see in the footnote here, one considered as a word will be the name of unity, but considered as a reality, it will be the unity of which the word one is the name. The sentence is made somewhat difficult of comprehension. He thinks it's he's trying to make it more confusing. I think it just is confusing. And Theaetetus says necessarily. Now from here, he is going to transition to talk about terms such as whole or unity or all. Before we go into this, let me just say a few words about this. Okay, take, for example, my phone. I got a message from somebody. Okay, anyway, take my phone, for example. If I were to take it apart, hey, I really want to see what it looks like inside. And if I were to just lay the pieces out on the table, every piece is here, none of them are missing, I can say they are all here. But can I say that it is a whole phone? It is not a whole. If somebody took your phone apart and said, hey, it's all there, you got the whole phone, I don't think you'd be okay with that. Because we understand that a whole is not only all the parts, but there's also a certain unity to it. And when something presupposes unity, that unity is a plan, it's an order, it's the functioning of the thing. And so what we see from this very simple example is that unity, or that whole, is greater than the all, and unity is greater than the whole. And so in metaphysics, the first principle of all is one. From that follows unity, from that follows whole, from that follows all. And we want to keep these terms clear in our minds because he doesn't keep them clear. Okay, this said, let's jump back into the text. So we're picking it up here. Where are we? This is 244e for those of you with a different text. It's 244e. Will they say that the whole is other than the one which exists or the same with it? We would say they're different, but Theaetetus says that of course they will and do say that it is the same. If then the whole is, as Parmenides says, on all sides like the mass of a well-rounded sphere, equally weighted in every direction from the middle, for neither greater nor less must needs be on this or that, then being such as he describes it, has a center and extremes, and having these must certainly have parts, must it not? Certainly. Well, actually, it's not certain because the word like, and this is from Parmenides' poem, of course, on nature, it's called. But the word like tells us that this is a comparison. It's a simile. It's not meant to be taken literally. And so he's not saying that the whole literally is a well-rounded sphere. He's simply saying it is like one. He's using this as a comparison. But we'll run with it. We'll put that aside for now. Yet nothing hinders that which has parts from possessing the attribute of unity in all its parts, in being in this way one, since it is all in whole. Very true. But is it not impossible for that which is in this condition to be itself absolute unity? Why? Why, surely that which is one must, according to right reason, be affirmed to be absolutely without parts. Yes, it must. But such a unity consisting of many parts will not harmonize with reason. I understand. Then shall we agree that being is one and a whole because it has the attribute of unity, or shall we deny that being is a whole at all? Notice here that he is confusing one and unity. A unity is a unity of parts. Things come together and create a unity. But a one is something pure beyond unity. Okay. But Theaetetus says that it is a hard choice that you offer me. That is very true, For being, having in a way had unity imposed upon it, will evidently not be the same as unity, and the all will be more than one. Yes. And further, if being is not a whole through having had the attribute of unity imposed upon it, and the absolute whole exists, then it turns out that being lacks something of being. Certainly. Let's go back over that one. So he's trying to say here that being is not a whole. It has unity imposed upon it. But if the whole exists, then he's implying somehow that that's the only thing that can exist. It can't be being also exists as a whole. He's saying it's not a whole. But even if it's not a whole, even if we were to call it a unity, would that mean it doesn't exist? But that's what he's implying here, that the whole exists. And so if being is not a whole, then being doesn't have being. That's the implication here. And I think you can see there's a lot of problems with this. And being anyway is a whole. But Theaetetus says certainly. And so by this reasoning, since being is deprived of being, it will be not being. So it will. And again, the all becomes more than the one, since being and the whole have acquired each its own nature. Yes, you can look at that one. But if the whole does not exist at all, being is involved in the same difficulties as before. And besides not existing, it could not even have ever come into existence. So first he considered if the whole does exist, and now if it does not, that makes even bigger problems. What do you mean? That which comes into existence always comes into existence as a whole. Therefore, no one who does not reckon the whole among things that are can speak of existence or generation as being. Notice again, he talks about, he's conflating the realms. That's the easiest way to say it. He's talking about things that are, and then he talks about generation, which is actually becoming, as being. And he says it's a problem to say that becoming is not being. And Theaetetus agrees that that certainly seems to be true. And so countless other problems, each one involving infinite difficulties. Sorry, I think I skipped this part. And moreover, that which is not a whole cannot have any quantity at all. For if it has any quantity, whatever that quantity may be, it must necessarily be of that quantity as a whole. Does that make sense? If it's not a whole, it can't have any quantity at all. Well, let's take, for example, my phone again. Again, imagining I took it all apart, laid the pieces out. Now, in my previous example, I had all of the pieces. But what if I lost one of them? Now it's no longer all, and I cannot make it the whole phone again. Although maybe I can make it look like it is if it's one of the middle inside pieces that's missing. But it isn't going to work, and so it's not the whole phone. Now, if it's not a whole, does that mean it has no quantity? Certainly the number of pieces, it has a quantity to it. If there were 100 pieces and I lost one of them, I have 99 pieces. Now, we can say, as he says here again, it must necessarily be of that quantity as a whole. Well, we can say the number 99 is a whole number, I suppose, but it's still not the whole phone, and it's 1. I guess the number is 1. And it's still one phone that's missing a piece, but it's not logical to say that it has no quantity, whether you call it 1 or 99. Even if you call that the whole of what I haven't lost, I guess you could say. But it's not the whole phone, and because our example here is not a whole, that which is not a whole. It's not the whole phone if I've lost any of the pieces. Does that mean it has no quantity? I think that's questionable. But Theaetetus says precisely. And so countless other problems, each one involving infinite difficulties, will confront him who says that being is, whether it be two or only one. The problems now in sight make that pretty clear, for each leads up to another, which brings greater and more grievous wandering in connection with whatever has previously been said. Now, we have not discussed all those who treat accurately of being and not being. We haven't spoken of any of them, really. Or at least we haven't treated them fairly. However, let this suffice. Okay, we're going to walk away from those who treat it accurately. So what are we going to do instead? We must turn our eyes to those whose doctrines are less precise, because of course we would. That we may know from all sources that it is no easier to define the nature of being than that of not being. Because nothing will make it clear to us how difficult this is than to look at people who are less precise. Ask yourself if that's logical. Is that what you would do if you wanted to find out if being and not being are precise, can be discussed precisely? Very well, then, we must proceed towards those others also. And indeed, there seems to be a battle like that of the gods and the giants going on among them because of their disagreements about existence. Okay, the gods and the giants. So I think you all know the story from mythology, or I've heard something of it. Okay, we'll come back to this idea of the gods and the giants. We'll see from the next page, we'll get a sense of where he's going, and then we'll see if we can put some names on these. So there's a comparison being made, a sort of analogy. Who are like the gods and who are like the giants? That's the question. Now, some of them drag down everything from heaven and the invisible to earth, actually grasping rocks and trees with their hands. For they lay their hands on all such things and maintain stoutly that that alone exists which can be touched and handled. For they define existence in body or matter as identical. And if anyone says that anything else which has no body exists, they despise him utterly and will not listen to any other theory than their own. So there he's talking about people who only say that what physically exists has any existence at all. So these we would call materialists. So that's one of our groups. Hold on to that in just a moment here, and we'll come back to it. Terrible men they are whom you speak. I myself have met with many of them. Therefore, those who contend against them defend themselves very cautiously with weapons derived from the invisible world above, maintaining forcibly that real existence consists of certain ideas which are only conceived by the mind and have no body. Real existence consists of certain ideas which are only conceived by the mind and they have no body. So whereas the first group only sees the physical as having any reality, the second group sees only the non-physical as having any reality. But the bodies of their opponents and that which is called by them truth, they break up into small fragments in their arguments, calling them not existence, but a kind of generation combined with motion. Change the color. There is always, Theaetetus, a tremendous battle being fought about these questions between these two parties. True. Okay, so these two parties then are the gods and the giants. Now, since we are dealing with, I was going to say a Platonist, that was where I went there, a Parmenian, and this is in the Platonic tradition, we can guess that the idealists would be the gods, and then the giants would be the materialists. And they're the ones who want to pull everything down to earth. Although technically they don't drag everything down. It says they drag down everything from heaven. They actually don't, if you only recognize the physical world as real, then you don't recognize the heavens at all. And so it isn't even accurate to say they drag it down. Yeah, we'll put that aside. But anyway, those are our two groups, the materialists and the idealists. Let us therefore get from each party in turn a statement in defense of that which they regard as being, How shall we get it? It is comparatively easy to get it from those who say that it consists in ideas, for they are peaceful folk. But from those who violently drag down everything into matter, it is more difficult, perhaps even almost impossible to get it. However, this is the way I think we must deal with them. What way? Of course, here we're looking at the ideas as in the eidos, and so comparing that to people then who are materialists. Our first duty would be to make them really better, if it were in any way possible. But if this cannot be done, let us pretend that they are better. Is that really the way to reason? If you want to try to understand their argument, would you do it by pretending that they have a different argument? Or if you wanted to convince them or bring them over to see things your way, would you do it by pretending that they aren't starting from their actual starting point? Neither way really makes sense. Yeah, going back to the beginning there. Let us get in turn from each party a statement in defense of that which they regard as being. So if you want to understand their position, you have to start from where they actually are. You can't pretend that they hold a different opinion to try to understand them. It doesn't make sense. But he says, let us pretend that they're better by assuming that they would be willing to answer more in accordance with the rules of dialectic than they actually are. For the acknowledgement of anything by better men is more valid than if made by worse men. But it is not these men that we care about. We merely seek the truth. If we seek the truth, then why are we pretending that they hold a different view? Quite right. Now tell them, assuming that they have become better, to answer you, and do you interpret what they say? I will do so. Let them tell whether they say there is such a thing as a mortal animal. Of course they do. And they agree that this is a body with a soul in it, do they not? Certainly. I need to pause here for a moment because to a modern reader, this makes no sense at all. Nobody who is a materialist, who does not believe in anything outside the physical world, would agree that we are bodies with soul. It may be helpful to consider that to the ancient Greeks, soul was really just some I don't even know what to call it, something that animates the body. They didn't really have anything more specific than that, and so it doesn't necessarily have the spiritual feeling to it that it has to our ears in the modern world. So there's something that animates the body. Just simply saying here that a mortal animal is a body of something that animates it somehow. And so that may be something, that can be agreed with. They may say it's something in the brain or have some other way of explaining it than we would, but they would agree that somehow the bodies are animated. So that's why he can say certainly. Giving to soul a place among things which exist. Yes, or at least giving this thing that animates the body. Well then, do they not say that one soul is just and another unjust, one wise and another foolish? Of course. And do they not say that each soul becomes just by the possession and presence of justice? It's actually habit. You can't really possess justice, but you can have the habit of justice, and that would be the Greek word here. Do they not say that each soul becomes just by the habit and presence of justice, and the opposite by the habit and presence of the opposite? Yes, they agree to this also. But surely they will say that that which is capable of becoming present or absent exists. Yes, they say that. Granting then that justice and wisdom and virtue in general and their opposites exist, and also, of course, the soul in which they become present, do they say that any of these is visible and tangible, or that they are all invisible? That none of them is visible, or pretty nearly that. Now here are some other questions. Do they say they possess any body? They no longer answer the whole of that question in the same way. They say they believe the soul itself has a sort of body, but as to wisdom and the other several qualities about which you ask, they have not the face either to confess that they have no existence or to assert that they are all bodies. It is clear, Theaetetus, that our men have grown better, for the aboriginal sons of the dragon's teeth among them would not shrink from any such utterance. They would maintain that nothing which they cannot squeeze with their hands has any existence at all. That is pretty nearly what they believe. Okay, let's pause for a moment here. Now, the footnote shows us here that the reference to the aboriginal sons of the dragon's teeth is a reference to King Cadmus, who killed a dragon, and then, as he was told to do, he sewed the teeth from which they sprang fierce warriors to be his companions, and they helped him then found the city of Thebes. And I just want to point out here also a little note that Prometheus Trust provides us in their student handbook to the Sophist. They point out here that Damascus says that Cadmus is the sublunary world as belonging to the domain of Dionysus. And then, I don't know, I think it was probably Tim Addy wrote this, but someone at the Prometheus Trust writes that the sublunary world, or the material world, is the world in which all things are split and isolated into separated existences. Materiality, considered without its immaterial harmonizing and governing laws, brings with its worldview, which would be the materialist worldview, a disintegrating tendency. The city of Cadmus, then, which is Thebes, is for this reason the city of tragedy. It's a city where brother is set against brother, where Antigone is entombed alive for daring to bury her dead brother, and Oedipus steps outside fundamental laws as he kills his father and forms an alliance with his mother. And he goes on to say a bit more about that city, but, well, they're examples. And we'll leave it there. But we can see here that Cadmus is associated then with materiality. Okay, the stranger goes on then to say, then let us question them further. For if they are willing to admit that any existence, no matter how small, is incorporeal, that is enough. Actually, I don't know that they would have agreed to that, because actually back here, where he says that they would maintain that nothing which they cannot squeeze with their hands has any existence at all, that pretty much then destroys the whole argument that he tried to build up here, right? That these materialists would agree that justice and wisdom and virtue in general and their opposites exist. I don't know that materialists would have agreed to that. They may have agreed that, yeah, there's something that animates the body. But beyond that, I think this is the more accurate statement down here, which means they still haven't really agreed. But of course, we're pretending that they have a different view because to make them more agreeable, right? So we can understand them. And yeah, I'm being facetious. They will then have to tell what that is which is inherent in the incorporeal and the corporeal alike, if we were to get them to agree to this at all, and which they have in mind when they say that both exist. Perhaps they would be at a loss for an answer, and if they are in that condition, consider whether they might not accept a suggestion if we offered it, and might not agree that the nature of being is as follows. So now we're going to get a definition of being. What is it? Speak, and we shall soon know. I suggest that everything which possesses any power of any kind, either to produce a change in anything of any nature, or to be affected even in the least degree by the slightest cause, though it be only on one occasion, has real existence. For I set up as a definition which defines being that it is nothing else than power. So a definition which defines being that it is nothing else than power. Power to affect change, or power to be changed, hold on to that. I think you can probably already see some problems with it, but hold on to that definition and we'll see where he goes with it. Well, since they have at the moment nothing better of their own to offer, they accept this. Good. For perhaps later something else may occur both to them and to us. As between them and us, then, let us assume this is, at least for the present, agreed upon and settled. It is settled. Then let us go to the others, the friends of ideas. So now he's going to go to the others. We saw the giants, and now we're going to the gods, or the idealists. The friends of ideas, and do you interpret for us their doctrines also? I will. You distinguish in your speech between generation and being, do you not? Yes, we do. And you say that with the body, by means of perception, we participate in generation, and with the soul, by means of thoughts, we participate in real being, which last is always unchanged and the same, whereas generation is different at different times. So that is the closest thing to anything rational that the stranger has said in quite a while. So let's mark that. So we're here, he's showing us that he does know the difference between being and becoming, even though he's been conflating the two realms over and over again. He does know the difference, and here he's showing us that. But most excellent men, talking to the idealists, how shall we define this participation which you attribute to both? Is it not that of which we were just speaking? What is that? A passive or active condition arising out of some power which is derived from the combination of elements. Possibly, Theaetetus, you do not hear their reply to this, but I hear it, perhaps, because I'm used to them. What is it, then, that they say? They do not concede to us what we said just now to the aboriginal giants about being. What was it? We set up as a satisfactory sort of definition of being the presence of the power to act or be acted upon in even the slightest degree. That was the definition on the previous page. Yes, it is in reply to this that they say generation participates in the power of acting and of being acted upon, but that neither power is connected with being. Right? Being is unchanging. And is there not something in that? Yes, something to which we must reply that we still need to learn more clearly from them, whether they agree that the soul knows and that being is known. So now he's shifting again. So now he's talking about knower and known. The soul is what knows, being is what is known, or the intelligible is what is known. They certainly assent to that. Well then, do you say that knowing or being known is an active or passive condition, or both? Or that one is passive and the other active? Or that neither has any share at all in either of the two? Clearly, they would say that neither has any share in either, for otherwise they would be contradicting themselves. I understand. This at least is true, that if to know is active, to be known must in turn be passive. Now, being, since it is, according to this theory, known by the intelligence insofar as it is known, is moved, since it is acted upon, which we say cannot be the case with that which is in a state of rest. Right. Is that right? Stop and think about that. To say it is known grammatically is called passive voice. But does that mean that it is moved to be acted upon? It is the object that is known, but does that mean that it is acted upon, that it is changed by being known? Is the intelligible changed because we experience it? If you have an awakening experience, a brilliant light experience, does that change the reality that you're experiencing, it doesn't really make any sense, does it? But for heaven's sake, shall we let ourselves easily be persuaded that motion and life and soul and mind are really not present to absolute being? That it neither lives nor thinks, but awful and wholly devoid of mind is fixed and immovable? That would be a shocking admission to make, stranger. But shall we say that it has mind but not life? How can we? But do we say that both of these exist in it, and yet go on to say that it does not possess them in a soul? So now he's bringing in the idea of being in a soul. Before we were talking about being itself. Now we're talking about it in a soul. What's he talking about here? But how else can it possess them? Then shall we say it has mind and life and soul? But although endowed with soul is absolutely immovable, all those things seem to me absurd. Now you do have to straighten out the metaphysics then. The clearer you are in metaphysics, the more you'll understand this section. So I will leave that as homework. That's something to work through. It must be conceded that motion and that which is moved exist, of course. Then the result is, Theaetetus, that if there is no motion, there is no mind in anyone about anything anywhere. Exactly. And on the other hand, if we admit that all things are in flux and motion, we shall remove mind itself from the number of existing things by this theory also. How so? Do you think that sameness of quality or nature or relations could ever come into existence without the state of rest? Not at all. What then? Without these, can you see how mind could exist or come into existence anywhere? By no means. And yet we certainly must contend that every argument against him who does away with knowledge or reason or mind and then makes any dogmatic assertion about anything. Certainly. Then the philosopher who pays the highest honor to these things must necessarily, as it seems, because of them, refuse to accept the theory of those who say the universe is at rest, whether as a unity or in many forms, and must also refuse utterly to listen to those who say that being is universal motion. He must quote the children's prayer, all things immovable and in motion, and must say that being in the universe consists of both. And Theaetetus says it's very true. Do we not then seem to have attained at last a pretty good definition of being? Theaetetus says, certainly. I'm not so sure. Let's go back, though, and look at this last statement, because this one here is an especially curious one. So we know from our study of metaphysics that we would never say that the universe is at rest. Our physical world, the universe is the physical world, the realm of becoming, of generation, constantly in flux. So we agree that we would refuse to accept the theory of those who say the universe is at rest. He says that we must also refuse utterly to listen to those who say that being is universal motion. This also sounds right? Being is absolute reality. It is at rest. It is never changing. Our universe, our physical world is always changing. Reality is never changing. So far we agree. And there's some children's prayer, or I'm not sure what it is exactly, but all things immovable and in motion. And then look what he concludes with. He says his conclusion is that we must agree to this idea here, that being in the universe consists of both. Well, you can try to save it by saying that being is the part that is at rest and the universe is the part that is in motion. And that's what he means by the immovable. Being is immovable and the universe is in motion. That's not what he says, though. He says that both consist of both. That's not what we concluded above. And so that statement does not make sense. And so what he just defined being as is both immovable and movable, just as he defined the universe in the same way. And so then he says, oh, now we've got a pretty good definition of being. No, I don't think we do. But we're going to stop there for now, and we'll pick it up from there next time. I think we're going into the 5 genera of being next time. And so I do hope that you'll join me for that. If you do have any questions or comments, feel free to put those below. And as always, I thank you for watching. Until next time.